All right. So this is a piece I've been thinking of as Kamala. Border czar no more. No more. Suddenly, the same media that identified her as the border czar has decided that Kamala is no longer the border czar because it became politically inconvenient given the state of the border. There's been a dramatic push by the legacy media to neutralize one of Vice President Kamala Harris's biggest vulnerabilities since becoming the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee, her long-standing border czar label. Harris was widely dubbed the border czar after President Biden tasked her in March 2021 to address the root causes of mass migration from Central and South America. While the Biden administration has rejected the title, the term was widely used by her critics and even embraced by multiple news organizations, at least until she ascended to the top of the ticket. Axios went viral Wednesday with its report about the border confusion that has haunted Harris, telling readers the Trump campaign and Republicans have tagged Harris repeatedly with the border czar title, which she never actually had. However, critics cited Axios's own reporting from 2021, saying that Biden had appointed Harris border czar. Axios later added an editor's note stating, quote, "This article has been updated and clarified to note that Axios was among the news outlets that incorrectly labeled Harris a border czar in 2021. Orwellian enough for you yet? Down the memory hole. So this was Axios. They got community noted, actually. And somebody pulled up their old article, which describes Harris, who's been appointed by Biden as the border czar. And this is Molly Hemingway. She's the editor-in-chief of The Federalist. The propaganda press working so hard to erase the fact that Kamala Harris was put in charge of the border shows not only what a vulnerability her role in the border is, but also what a huge vulnerability her general incompetence is. CNN had a similarly drastic change of heart. CNN correspondents Ed Lavandera and CNN commentator Alyssa Farah Griffin both referred to Harris as the border czar in 2021 and 2023, respectively. This week, the network repeatedly rebuked the label. Quote, "The Biden team didn't declare her the border czar," CNN's Casey Hunt said Wednesday morning. "They wanted her to work on kind of the root causes of immigration." What former President Trump said about Harris and immigration was not true. She was never appointed border czar. Fellow CNN anchor John Berman also said Wednesday. Fox News Digital asked multiple news organizations, including CNN and Axios, to explain their vocal shift away from the border czar label for Harris. None responded. MSNBC host Simone Sanders, who previously served as Harris's chief spokeswoman in the Biden administration before joining the network, lumped in the border czar claims against her former boss with misinformation about the VP. It's like the cheap fakes. People are going to have to challenge the misinformation, Sanders said on Morning Joe Wednesday. You already hear folks talking about the border czar. She wasn't the border czar. She did diplomacy in Central America, but the campaign is going to have to make that case. A clip went viral of left-wing media figure Ron Filipkowski previously calling Harris the border czar on MSNBC after he posted on social media that Axios was incorrect. So here he is, going so far as to say they called Harris the border czar because a lot of times the media sucks. The media sucks. So let's take a look at his previous statement on this.
It's a big problem.
This is Filipkowski himself.
I think Joe Biden has gone there once. Kamala Harris, who was appointed as the border czar, hasn't gone there at all. And so I think that communication is a big problem.
I guess
I'd say so, sir.
I guess he means himself when he says that the,
right.
that the media sucks. He's telling on himself. So ABC's Jonathan Karl sang from the same sheet of music, saying she wasn't the border czar. That's what Republicans labeled her. She was given the job of dealing with all the migration that was coming up from Central America, but they will portray her as the one who was in charge of the border, which of course is issue number one for Republicans.
I'm sorry. Are we talking about all the migration that's happening across the border?
Yeah.
I mean,
that sounds like a border czar. If you remember, Biden said she speaks for me on the border. Right. She speaks for me. What is that? CBS News pushed back on the label with multiple segments dedicated to the subject on its streaming channel. Quote, Vice President Harris was not a border czar, CBS anchor John Dickerson declared in one of the segments. Media, quote, fact checkers rushed to defend Harris. PolitiFact gave the claim from the RNC that as border czar, Harris was put in charge of stopping illegal immigration a mostly false rating. USA Today similarly ruled it false to say she was put in charge of the border and that her role was more limited than what a border czar would do. Several other outlets also bent over backwards to separate Harris from the label. Time magazine ran the headline, Kamala Harris was never Biden's border czar. Here's what she really did, calling the label misleading while admitting it had become a political liability. NPR said conservatives made up the inaccurate term border czar, insisting the role of controlling the border belongs to DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. The Washington Post accused the Trump campaign of falsely branding her the nation's border czar in a campaign ad. The New York Times got ahead of other news organizations, surprise there, printing the headline, Why Republicans Keep Calling Kamala Harris the Border Czar on July 17th, 4 days before Biden announced his exit from the race. Okay, so let's take a look at a compilation, banned bill here, put together of what the media's opinion was until 5 minutes before she was named as the presumptive nominee.
About her border record, calling her a
border czar. Vice President Harris was not a border czar.
Meantime, Vice President and border czar Kamala Harris facing some backlash.
What he said about Harris and immigration was not true. She was never appointed border czar.
And this will be her first visit to the U.S.-Mexico border region since she was appointed as the border czar by President Biden.
People going to have to counter the misinformation. You already hear folks talking about the border czar. She wasn't the border czar.
President Biden tapped Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, to be the border czar.
Now, she wasn't the border czar. That's what Republicans labeled her.
They were very critical of Kamala Harris, especially in her role as border czar.
Now what she's up against is folks lying about her border record, calling her a border czar.
Kamala Harris, who was appointed as the border czar.
The Biden team didn't declare her the border czar. They wanted her to work on kind of the root causes of immigration.
There has been so much criticism against Kamala Harris. You know, she was the border czar.
Calling her sort of the border czar, which wasn't necessarily the case.
So the border, if they weren't planning to address it in a major way, do not make her your border czar. She met with some of the Northern Triangle countries, but nothing has effectively changed.
You know, it really seems like they thought of her as the border czar.
It does seem like indeed that. Well, and also I will have to say, I do kind of have a quibble with the fact that we keep calling her a border czar. But number one, like we've never had a czar. That's not a normal political appointment in the country anyway. So it was already an honorific from the very beginning.
Right.
It was meant to just represent, like, out of the White House team that's directly working with Biden, she's going to be the one that has the answers on the border and on immigration and all that type of stuff. That's what they meant by border czar. And so then the distraction was saying, well, technically, if someone was actually the border czar, it would be the DHS Secretary Mayorkas. Yeah, but then we would have just called him the secretary, you know, like that. There is no border czar position. The reason why they called it that was it was just simply to be, she's the point person in the White House dealing with the border and immigration.
Which they know very well.
They know that very well.
This is just in keeping with the Orwellian way that they've just all mobilized at once to try to manage her record. They're already trying to massage her record as a prosecutor that we were talking about with Caleb there. And a lot of this is really talked about in Caleb's book, the way that these globalist powers really want to censor the public. They really want to control the flow of information. They do not trust populism. They do not believe the people have a right to know. It's funny because they constantly talk about their belief in democracy, but they really don't believe in the core institutions of democracy like freedom of speech, freedom of debate. And that is just becoming increasingly just transparently Orwellian. No, she's not the border. Yesterday, she's the border czar. Today, she's not the border czar.
Right. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And one of the other things that I would point out, it was kind of mentioned in that article that she was supposed to address the Honduran, El Salvadorian, like that type of situation. The Hillary Clinton State Department and their link to the Honduran crisis and the reason why we have so many people from Honduras at our borders was perpetrated by the Clinton State Department. That's another aspect of it that Caleb had gotten into in his book. So that's like that State Department causes this type of crisis, causes these refugee situations, and then everyone else is left to deal with it.
Please clap.